Welcome to another night of Iamblichus' reading group on the Egyptian Mysteries. Tonight we talk about cosmic sympathy. I hope you enjoy it. Hi everyone, thanks for joining. Thanks for our discussion members. It's the October 3rd meeting of the reading group on Iamblichus' Egyptian Mysteries. I want to go ahead and thank everyone for joining, and hopefully everyone had a good week since we last met. I did have a chance to go ahead and get up the recording from the last meeting that we had, and listening through that, I kind of came to the conclusion that we might want to revisit this notion of cosmic sympathy, Iamblichus' theory of cosmic sympathy. Ryan, last time you brought up Osman Spare as an example of someone who has a pretty good theory of cosmic sympathy, or something similar to cosmic sympathy that Iamblichus is discussing. So I'm wondering whether we can go through, what you can tell us about, you called it Kia, and then kind of do a comparison, a discussion of the comparison between the two, whether you think Iamblichus or the group, whether you think Iamblichus' theory of cosmic sympathy is similar to Spare's, and maybe do a contrast and compare to that.
Sure, yeah. So when I think about like Spare and a lot of the chaos magicians in their their kind of theoretical constructions of how their magic operates, that kind of a key concept in my mind is that concept of Kia. The way I see it is sort of the binding that holds reality together. So it is present within all of us. It's present within all things. And you can draw on and access it through, meditation, ritual, like sigilization is a big one in sort of the chaos magic realm. I think that idea of sigils is pretty, I think it has some key similarities to, theurgic cosmic sympathy. I don't think it's exactly the same. It's definitely not like the perfect analog, but I definitely see some key similarities there, because what's all about is implanting in the Kia a symbol, a sigil, it's called in this way of thinking, that then can begin to impact on the material realm, like on the earth, So the way I see it in terms of similarities is through those sigils. Whereas they're created by you, though, and that's not necessarily always true in these ways of thinking. There are these symbols that, are, have a broader context, have a more history, but it is something that you can create yourself. Whereas, when you're working with cosmic sympathy, a la Iamblichus, you have a similar function of the above interacting with the below, largely through a symbolic representation of a energy or an idea or a god or a daimon. But it is pre-existing. It is, it pre-exists humanity. It's like a closer emanation to the one, to God, than we are. So again, like when we're thinking about the Kia as a concept, I think that's quite similar to Iamblichus in the sense that it creates a cosmos that is interconnected, that allows us to access, various aspects, various symbols, various energies from our spot here in the material realm. But where it's different, and I don't think that Iamblichus would probably agree with is that those visualizations, those sympathies, so to speak, can come from you. I think he has much more of a top-down approach than someone like Spare. Yeah, that's kind of my thinking. Does anyone have any thoughts or anything or questions? Or
No, I actually have a question. So lately I have been researching the whole Neoplatonism school of thinking, and what you said, it's similar to anima, as I understand it, because there's the one at the beginning, then there's nous, the ideas itself, and anima is the force that creates. Is it like something similar to it that you say?
yeah, I think there's definitely some real similarities between the concept of Kia and anima, though I would say, whereas anima, in my understanding, and like this is not my thing, so correct me if I'm wrong, anyone else in the call, but from my understanding, the anima is more of the force which allows for materiality to occur, whereas the Kia is, I like to think of it as a bridge that connects all things rather than a force for materiality as such. You know what I mean? Though I think it is the same, or a bit very similar at least, in the sense that like it is a force that can be accessed to affect change on the material plane. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely agree that there's some deep similarities there. And I mean, I think that like a lot of these more modern magical thinkers, especially like in that, you know, Spare was like, I think the Book of Pleasure came out in like 1910 or something, early 1900s. So like, I think that these thinkers that are existing within the frameworks of like 1850s to World War One, largely Great Britain, you have that, there's that like re-interest, especially in the like aristocratic classes, in Greek thought, in, you know, some of the Greek thinkers that they wouldn't have learned about in school. So I think that a lot of these people, from Spare to Crowley, that they all have similar frameworks through Neoplatonism, because I think a lot of them were probably reading that, and I think that I'm fairly certain Crowley specifically states that he is using it as an inspiration. So yeah, I think that there's definitely some like similarities, not only in kind of how it's constructed, but also in its first principles, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thanks for your explanation. So just like one more thing about this magic. So, you know, obviously when you would first think about magic, it's, you know, it's like from the children's shows, right? You know, you say a thing, something happens. And is it any similar to that, or is it like a completely different thing? Because if it's similar to anima, it has the power to create, realize potential. I think that's the way to say it, right?
You know, I actually think that's a pretty good way of framing, like especially when we're looking at chaos magic specifically, which kind of Spares the first thinker in that line. Yeah, no, I think that that's definitely a pretty good way to look at it. I think of it as, yeah, bringing potential into materiality, I think, is kind of the core to that way of magical thinking. So yeah, I see it as quite similar in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's about,
And
yeah,
could you give
I
an
think that,
example?
sorry, pardon me.
And could you give an example?
Sure. So like, I mean, again, so in my practice, my sort of main focus when it comes to chaos magic is this idea of sigilization. So creating a symbolic representation of an idea. That can be through words, that can be through all sorts of things, but sort of the classic example that you see is, you know, a sigil made from the letters of the words of the thought construct it into a symbol. And then by focusing on that symbol, by ideally seeding the Kia with it, it creates a feedback loop. So say like money is the like obvious example that a lot of people in chaos magic would think about. So, you create a symbolic representation of that idea of money coming into you. You seed the Kia with that symbol. And through that feedback loop, both your own action, which reinforces the symbol, because you're supposed to live in accordance with that symbol while you're doing a working, as well as the downward pressure from the above, however you want to contextualize that. That's what creates for that potential to be realized.
I see. There's actually a good book on a topic like this, but it's not exactly from a spiritual standpoint. It's called Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, I think. He also basically says about the same thing you did, about the ideas, how they affect your actions and pretty much your life, your beliefs. So it's all in the sphere of ideas. And I mean, that definitely, you could say it definitely works because you like set your mind to a goal, right? And it's like your unconscious self works on it. So
Exactly.
there's
Yeah,
definitely something like that.
that's cool. What's that book called?
Psycho-Cybernetics.
Psycho-Cybernetics. I will definitely check that out. I always love to like see these sort of ideas explored from a non-overtly esoteric perspective. You know what I mean? And I think that there are a lot of sort of analogs that you can see in, especially like philosophy generally, but philosophy, even like the like self-help genre has elements of it. Like I think that's cool when you start to see these concepts brought outside this context, because I think that it adds a little bit more weight to them then, at least for me.
Well, I think we definitely have to put it into the into the context of being able to improve yourself, a search for self-awareness, and a search for attaining the best that we can be as far as our true selves. There's the notion that we somehow have a true self as opposed to a self that has not attained realization. And I think, self-help books are certainly part of that. But if we limit ourselves to this world, are we kind of cutting ourselves off from a vaster horizon that Iamblichus seems to see here?
Oh, I mean, for sure. I think that like a lot of those concepts really scratch the surface at what this is, and I think that comes from a lot of people not wanting to accept an overtly magical way of thinking, because it goes against, self-perception, their own doubts, their own beliefs, these sorts of things.
Well, I mean, that kind of assumes we know what a magical view of things is.
Fair enough, yeah.
What does that mean? What's that mean?
I guess a magical way of thinking to me, and I know that there's like a concrete definition to this, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but a magical way of thinking for me is the idea that those symbols can have material outcomes, that the above does have an effect on the below. I know that sounded maybe derogatory when I said it. I didn't mean it as. I hope you guys all understand that I'm not trying to have any like negative connotations there. Not at all.
Well, I didn't catch that. In what way would that have been negative?
Oh, well, I mean, I've just found that a lot of times I've heard magical thinking discussed in commentary, especially, on the like political side of things. It's usually used to dismiss an idea. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that can't be true. That's magical thinking.
Yeah,
so
that's not what you're talking about. Right? You're talking about something different.
Yeah. No, I'm just anyways. But then like bringing it all back to Iamblichus.
Well, sorry, I don't want to let that pass. There is magical thinking in a negative sense, isn't there? At least I think there is. I think it's very superstitious type of thinking. I think it's a very superficial way of kind of linking ideas together that have no relationship with each other, and then superimposing some type of supernatural element onto it.
Right.
Isn't that? I mean, isn't
Yeah,
that a
no,
reality?
that pretty
thing?
much describes, yeah, what I was talking about. No, I agree that is for the most part negative, and I mean that's why I like someone like Iamblichus, right? Because he is able to build a framework on which these ideas actually make sense. They're philosophically valid, and that's why I like a lot of occultist writers, is that they give a deeper meaning and explanation to these things that doesn't it allows us not to rely on things like superstition. It allows us to dig deeper.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my other questions, although I don't want to get sidetracked from where we are with the cosmic sympathy, but maybe we could talk about this when we get a little bit deeper into them. But Iamblichus does seem to assume that philosophy is important for this theurgic lifestyle. That we do have to be able to reason, maybe not rationalize, but reason, be able to use our reason, pull apart ideas, and to be able to look at them and understand the right from the wrong way of thinking, and whether an idea is correct or not.
Right. And I think that the key there, and sorry, we'll get back to cosmic sympathy. Just finishing the thought. I think the key there is that Iamblichus would say that there is a wrong way of thinking based on argumentation and reason, right? He will lay out a theological framework that then, dictates kind of the rest of his theory. Whereas I think a lot of times when we get into like someone who just is purely magically thinking, so to speak, there is not that, there isn't that wrong way or right way. It just kind of is based on a lot of times feelings, I would say. But anyways, not to get in the weeds.
Well, if we were to talk about Spare, what is his philosophical, or no, let's not go philosophical, let's go magical. What's his magical way of thinking? Is it, I mean, last time you were talking about the fact that he's an artist, and that, or perhaps that was King Nine talking about how he was how Spare is an artist, and he brings this artistic sensibility to an understanding of reality. I mean, we have lots of artists running around who, like Picasso and others, and maybe we could make a case that, hey, that's a pretty magical way of thinking. Is that what Spare is talking about, or is he talking about something on top of that?
See, when I see Spare's like artistic element coming in, it comes from intuition, I think, is the key element in his. And this is like based on my own reading. This is just, I'm sure there are people who are like Spare scholars that would disagree with me on this. But I think that the key to like the artistic side of his framework comes from intuition, that just like ability to access the above based on our innate senses as a human being, and being able to then just integrate that in and know that that is right. So whereas Iamblichus might rely more on reason to rationalize, I think someone like Spare might rely a lot more on intuition to have that innate understanding. And that's where the artistic side comes for me, because I think that a lot of art, be it, any type of art that you do, it comes from that element of intuition is like deeply ingrained in that. Being able to express that intuition in materiality in art, I think, is, deeply connected with his ability to act magically.
So
I think it comes
intuition,
from a similar inspiration.
sure. So intuition is, again, it's another term we've just introduced now. So now we have to think about intuition and what that is in terms of a magical awareness of the world. So my question was last time, or perhaps it was, I think King 9 talked about this. You have to be an artist to think magically, or does thinking magically bring it out? And then number 2, what if it's, I mean, Iamblichus would have perhaps some serious issues with it, because for Iamblichus, anything related to the body or anything related to materiality or our current emotional structure is questionable, right? We have to kind of get out of what we've been given in order to be able to begin to ascend to the higher realm, right? Because I mean, because it's fallen. Everything that we have now, the reason that we can't see what's outside with this other reality, this transcendent reality, this magical way of thinking, is because our sensory apparatus is occluded. It's cluttered up by the fall. You know, so is being artistic somehow a way of cleansing our apparatus? Have the artists found a way to cleanse the apparatus, or not?
I mean, for me, it definitely is.
Yeah.
By like being able to, and I again, like symbolic thinking has a lot to do with this, and I think that actually ties in back nicely with this idea of cosmic sympathy in the Iamblichus. But being able to articulate complex esoteric concepts in a single image, or even it doesn't need to be an image. I use images because I'm not a songwriter or anything like that. But yeah, like the act of creation in and of itself, in my opinion, gives us access to that greater power. That act of creation allows for the above to be manifested in the below.
Well, I mean, if you go by the Sufis, Ibn al-Arabi, for example, one could say that, you know, kind of taking their lead from Aristotle, talking about the active imagination. But again, I mean, and again, that goes back to Iamblichus as well. Active imagination is something which occurs after the apparatus has been cleansed in some way.
Right.
You begin to you get contact, or you're able to contact these other realities, or these other realities are able to contact you because you somehow made an effort to be open to these things. And it seems like artists are born that way, right? At least the ones that I've met. They're just born that way, and they have the apparatus, perhaps. And I mean, he might agree. You know, there are heroes, right? There are angelic beings which do come back to life, and they do have this ability to perceive the other reality. They do remember more of the other reality than those who have been reincarnated and have forgotten. So maybe it's that the artists are remembering more of the other world than perhaps us ordinary mortals do.
Well, I'm not going to use that term to any of my artist friends because they all think too highly of themselves anyways. But I think that's like, I think there's definitely something to that. And I mean, like, I think that again, if we like go back to this idea of intuition, I think that plays into that fairly strongly. You know what I mean? I think that intuition sometimes maybe is the memory of the other reality.
Yeah. See, when we talk about intuition, I guess I I want to make sure that, at least for me, intuition is somehow related to the biological
Right.
stuff that I am. It's all psychological. So I was
Right.
born
Right.
with
Right.
it all biological and everything like that. But it seems to me that if I'm going to at least be following Iamblichus, or at least part of the way anyway, I've got to somehow supplant the artificial, the biological with the non-biological. That there's a supernatural aspect
Yeah.
to things.
But is it though? Like, sorry to interrupt, but is
Oh,
intuition
go ahead.
biological? Like, for me, I've always felt like the intuitive aspect was always beyond that, whereas yeah, I've always kind of related it, because intuition comes from quite a deep place for me. Like, my intuitive faculty it seems like more of a guiding force rather than biological.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of
And
with you on this one, Farzana. I see it in a very similar way.
yeah, because like, I feel like the term intuitive spiritual insight makes more kind of sense to me. Like, that's how I experience it. And just interesting that you mentioned the Sufi mystic Ibn Arabi. He is actually he's known as Sheikh al-Akbar, like he's known as the master in mysticism. And I was actually reading some of his work, one of his books called Mystical Astrology, just a few days ago. I haven't read all of it, just kind of going through it. And just this idea of the cosmic symphony, um, the way that I think that it relates to what he talks about is a synchronization to get in sync with the cosmic symphony.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways that I think that can be done is to be in tune with the mansions of the moon. So I was just, I guess it's a question for anyone that's done a bit of magic in association with the mansions of the moon. Has anyone kind of done any of that, or know what I'm kind of talking about?
There's a grimoire called The Mansions of the Moon. In fact,
Yeah.
I've been looking at purchasing it. I haven't practiced it myself, but
Yeah, because I've
I,
got one of the books. It is the grimoire, but it's the Sufi version. But to me, these magic squares and they use the Arabic numbers, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But what does catch my attention is the mansion of the moon. So somehow working with the different mansions and their energies can help us to synchronize with this cosmic symphony. That's kind of what I'm getting from it. So I just wanted to know if anyone is kind of familiar with that, because it kind of makes sense to me in that way. Like, how do you get in touch with this cosmic symphony? There must be something that we can synchronize with, or we can entrain with. And I think
yeah.
it's this mansion of the moon. That's why these mansions are absolutely essential for magic. Like, you have to know the mansions of the moon for it to work effectively, according to grimoire anyway.
Yeah.
I'm actually not familiar with that work. Do you mind explaining in a little bit more depth what you mean?
Do you mean the mansions, or
Yeah.
the grimoire?
Yeah.
So the mansions, I mean, I don't know too much about it, because I've not really delved into magic in that way. But there was something that really just caught my attention when I was looking into Ibn Arabi's work, when he speaks about the mansions. And then, I think it's in the Picatrix, right? Is it not? I'm
No.
pretty sure they use it, no? Maybe it's a
Well,
different.
they may use lunar types of
Yeah, I think it's the same. I think it's the same
invocation,
thing.
but the book that I'm looking at is called The Mansions of the Moon is a grimoire, which
Yes, that's a different book, but I think the
yeah,
Picatrix is based on the Mansions of the Moon. I'm pretty sure because from what I remember.
quoted when I have it here in front of me. I'll
Yeah,
just
it's the lunar mansion, so they call it the lunar mansions, or it's
yeah,
known as the Mansions of the Moon.
let me take a look because I think the original here is the complete picture. Originally, I think it was called the. Anyway, um, we could talk about that perhaps.
Yeah, so just this idea, like when you mentioned Ibn Arabi, it did kind of, it was interesting because I like to.
Was Ibn Arabi doing magic? Do you think?
I don't think so. He was more of a mystic.
Yeah.
He was more talking about like the divine manifestation of man. So his work kind of goes down that line. But I think some of his successors were like took from his work and made the grimoire in the Sufi tradition. And his name was Al-Buni, and his is just a book of magic. So it stems from there, but not Ibn Arabi himself. He was more of a mystic than a theurgist, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
magic. Arabic books of magic is certainly where the Latin grimoires and other books um, were influenced by, from what I understand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it was it's probable, at least from my understanding of historical sources, that it's by
Mhm,
way,
mhm.
it's by way of the Arabic learning, Arabic learning in general, not just magic, that a lot of the um, Greek and Egyptian understanding of the world were transmitted
Yes,
to
yes, and also
the Latin world.
yes, and I think alchemy as well. I think it stems
Yeah,
from
yeah,
an
right.
Arab. Yeah, and what's really interesting about the mansions of the moon is that what Ibn Arabi says is that for each mansion he assigns an Arabic letter.
Hmm.
So there's 28 Arabic letters, and then there's 28 mansions of the moon. And he says that he says that you would think that each mansion would represent a letter, but he said that's not actually the case. What the case is that each letter represents the mansion. So it's almost as if this letter or this sound or this vibrational frequency is the creation of that mansion. And I found that really intriguing. Like that really caught my attention. So this is now giving me an insight into how we ourselves can synchronize with this cosmic symphony because
Yeah,
it
so
seems like it's through like this vibrational frequency
interesting
through
because yeah, there are a lot of I think when we talk about the cosmic sympathy as well as the symphony, the I
Mhm.
when we talk about that, I think there are elements of that to Iamblichus and certainly to Egyptian um, magic. I've been reading some things on the Greek magical papyri and the Vosus Magicae, the magic
Uh-huh.
voices, the nomina barbara, the magical names and the syllables. A, E, O, U,
Oh
A.
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
those when the priests in the Egyptian temples were saying those, they were definitely setting up some type of vibrational environment in which the soul and in which the spirit that they were
Yes, yes.
invocating could somehow you know, they thought of it in terms of, I guess, bringing the spirit down, the Ba, bringing
Right, right, yes.
and
Yeah,
inhabit.
that's it. So it's like a descending of whatever it is, I don't know, divine light or whatever it is to the
Mm-hmm.
man, as well as an ascending of the man to the divine. I
Hmm.
think it's a two-way thing, and I think that's how it works. And it's interesting that you mentioned that because the three kind of sacred languages that are just on my radar. I mean, obviously there's more, like Sanskrit and the others, but I think that the three that stand out for me is the Hebrew, um, the Arabic, and the Greek. So I think there's a lot of, there's a lot in those. But just coming back to the question that Ryan was talking about, the mansions of the moon. So I think that the like the lunar cycle, we can all see the visible one, which is the new moon, and then the waxing moon, and then the full moon and waning moon. So that's all visible. But I think what the mansions are is each position of the moon according to the zodiac, like what its position is, and as it moves through the zodiac. So, which is more difficult to see because you'd have to be very much aware of the backdrop, which is the zodiac. So, if you're aware of that, or you can actually see where there isn't much light pollution, you'd be able to, after with practice, I guess, you'd be able to tell which mansion, which is the house
Right.
that the moon is in. So that's basically what it means by the mansions.
Yeah, that's the astrological thinking, which is kind of the underpinning of Egyptian magic, but also of it sounds like Arabic magic as well. Of course, that's what the Picatrix is, very astrological. It's based on a
Yeah,
lot of astrological magic.
and I guess it would make sense, like for whatever it is in the heavens, I guess, to come through to the earth, there needs to be some kind of alignment. I mean, just kind of thinking out loud, and that's how it kind of sounds to me. So then when it's in the alignment, it's almost as if it opens a gateway. That's the only way that I can make sense of it. And I think that's why we can then access that particular energy to make that particular magic or whatever it is that they're doing.
Right.
But for me, it's like, putting the magic aside, like, with not so much practical magic, but in terms of working with these energies, I'm quite interested in that.
And all of that, and all of that's made possible by this idea that there is this cosmic sympathy which relates to the, and I think Brian was talking about it earlier, with the above and the below.
Yes, yes,
There's
yes.
this continuity from a higher reality to a lower reality, and there's some type of flow of energy, for lack of a better term, for now.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So, but it
Flow of
seems like
energy.
it does, but it seems like it changes, doesn't it? Like it's not just one. It seems like there's different types that we can get in touch with.
Yeah, he's talking. It seems that Iamblichus thinks that if we can get in touch with the daimon of one kind or another, that we can begin to channel that energy.
Right. What's really interesting that now that you've mentioned that is that when I've looked at Albuni's work, he talks about the different spirits that descend depending on mansion the moon is in. So he will say, like, on this on in mansion one, there'll be a mixture of spirits in terms of, there are some malevolent and some auspicious. And then there'll be a mixture of them on this day. The mansion, when the mansion is in number 5, I'm just saying,
Right.
speculating here, right? That there'll be a mixture of spirits of good. So that's when there's good fortune. So you can really call upon that,
Yeah.
So it's interesting because he names it and he's quite specific.
That's interesting. I just downloaded. I'm not a big believer in astrology, but reading this stuff that I am about Egyptian magic and how they really believed in the influence of the planets, and then the way that they were able to um, chop up time, if you will, into these influences. Every minute, every hour had like a certain planet. Number one, there were planets assigned to like the hours, and then each day, of course, has its own planet. But
Yes, yeah.
number of minutes that actually occur within a planetary hour are different than, let's say, 60 minutes. They could actually, it depends on the path of
Wow.
the sun,
Yeah,
on
yeah,
stuff. And it's actually quite interesting. There's an app
yeah. It
that
does
I,
get very, very complicated. Like that's extremely
yeah,
complicated. But that's
but
why I like the kind of, yeah, sorry.
but if you're able to synchronize yourself, I guess what you're saying is if one were able to synchronize one's action and one's activities and one's
Yeah,
thoughts and one's spiritual longings to these um, spirits that are being generated at the particular time of day, then one can carry out certain type, let's say, certain actions. Like
yeah, yeah.
at this very moment, in this hour, well, at this month, at this day, at this hour, at this minute, I will be able to perform a ritual which will bring me good luck.
Yeah,
I'm generalizing, of course, but
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
that's kind of where they're coming from, I think.
yeah, and then if it's to get in touch with the daemon, then I guess there must be some kind of like it must be specific. Like, can it be done anytime, anywhere, any day? Like maybe not. Maybe that's why it's hard to do it. I mean, I don't know.
Well, so you don't perform. I know Ryan has, but he says he's got to take off for a second. You don't perform practical magic.
No, 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 no. I'm far more interested in like what you said about this flow of energy, like this idea of something flowing. Like I'm far more interested in getting in touch with that.
Hmm. But it's interesting that there is, if we can, I mean, what is this sympathy that's going on? This cosmic sympathy. I guess I'm trying to get more of a feel for that and whether it's even believable in the modern world. Can we believe
Yeah.
in something like that?
The way that I've kind of I mean, I try to understand things that make things easy for my mind, and it seems like it's this spiral, this idea of the golden ratio, and it's like a cycle within a cycle within a cycle. And then when they're in alignment or you can contact these different spheres, I guess, you can ascend. It- That's the only way that I've kind of gotten my head around this idea of this,
Well,
grand kind
yeah.
of
Next
thing.
time I want to do a presentation, if you will, on
Mm.
um, William James and his theory of this kind of cosmic consciousness, for lack of maybe it's the same thing as cosmic sympathy, but it would be
Mm.
something which would be able to begin to explain this notion that everything is interconnected. That somehow, if we can, like we were saying, if we can kind of synchronize our actions, our thoughts, our feelings into a one into a unified way of being, then we can per- accomplish another thing based
Mm.
on that unified will, if you will. But what
Yeah.
is it that we're getting in contact with? Is it something material? Is it something literally supernatural that's outside of this world? Is it what holds together human beings or human beings and animals and the world? Even it even goes beyond animals. It goes if you believe Iamblichus, it also talks about stones. Certain stones have a power to influence events, influence my feelings and my thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that like the key to all of this is symbolic thinking, and I think that like that, for me, anyways, is how we can operationalize the idea of cosmic sympathy. And sorry, I missed a little bit there. My partner just got home, but and I think that it works to explain both like, well, I think it's quite a good catch-all explanation for a lot of these things. You have an explanation for, like as Iamblichus talks about the stones and the herbs and the aromatics and all this stuff. It explains the astrology, which act as symbols of a certain energy within the cosmos. But it also, in my opinion, then explains, like, going back to Spare and the chaos magic side of things, it explains why those sigils have an impact, because it allows you to seed the above with a symbolic representation of reality. So to me, like, that is the key to this door, to this puzzle, is being able to view things symbolically, and in fact being able to view those symbols not just as analogs of one another, but as one another. There is no difference between, the astrological Aries and iron. They are one and the same. And that's what allows for this through line, which can, affect materiality. Not only affect materiality, but that can allow you to connect with baseball game. It's got me going. It allows you to connect with the above, and it's through these symbols that those through lines are created. And I think that is a big part of cosmic sympathy for me.
Was Spare carrying out rituals while he was doing this?
I believe so, yeah. I think that they were not like rituals in a tradition. I think they were based on his own understanding. But I kind of, ritual maybe is not the best word to describe it, but there were symbolic actions which, was able to reflect his magical thinking. And again, I think that that's what a ritual is, right? It's like allowing you to be the gods. It's allowing you to inhabit that space, that energy. Yeah.
The energy created by the sigil, or the energy created by the action?
I think that the action and the sigil are one and the same, and that's why they work. That's where the symbol gains power, is because they are commensurate with one another. There is no difference between the sigil and the ritual and the herbs used within it and the astrological frameworks under which it's completed. They're all one and the same, which I know doesn't make the most amount of sense on its face. But I think when you can start seeing it, or at least when I've been able to start thinking about it that way, my action has been a lot more effective.
I think it's a combination. Like, I find the combination of them all effective rather than one or the other. Like the sound and the visual and the action, like combination of them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that. I would just, the one caveat I would have to that is that they are adding to the same pot, so to speak. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not various. They're not like various ingredients that come together to create the cake. They are all the cake, and they're just adding more cake.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
So we've kind of come to a place where we're saying that there is this cosmic sympathy, and we're agreeing with Iamblichus that we can somehow, we're agreeing that it exists. We're agreeing that there is this connection between the higher reality, the reality of the gods, and the reality of the soul. That there's some communication going on, or at least the possibility of communication. And and the soul has less awareness of what the gods have. The gods have complete awareness, or at least complete in terms of their place within the cosmic hierarchy. And we being souls that have this limited capacity right now, can somehow get in contact with that reality. What is that reality supposed to be then? What are we imagining? I mean, he doesn't really tell us right off, right? Maybe that's because he assumes that his audience, specifically Porphyry and others, understand that the reality that we're talking about is the transcendent reality, right? This one, the universe, the cosmic one, the one that's beyond all comprehension, that's beyond all awareness, that is comprehends everything and yet is not and never comprehended. Is that he's assuming that we can somehow get in contact with that? He doesn't say it, but that's at least I don't think he says it in as explicit terms as that.
I have a question slash like just I guess a thought about all this. If the one contains all, right? How do we use cosmic sympathy, which does require multiplicity, various things represent other things. How do we use that to ascend to one, which encompasses all?
Well,
I don't have an answer for that. Obviously.
That's a great question. How do we get oneness out of multiplicity? That's the question that they belabored for however long. Yeah, and of course you can read Proclus's Elements of Theology to kind of get that really hyper. I don't even know if it's philosophical, hyper metaphysical way of explaining it.
I mean, yeah, that's like something like it's a paradox, I guess, but it's like on from an earthly point of view, we have to ascend through the hierarchy, but from a divine perspective, it's all an illusion. Like it's the way that my mind can kind of grasp it a little bit, but it is a paradox, right? Because if the one contains all, then what is this hierarchy or symphony all about, or sympathy? What's it all about? And it's like, from one aspect, yes, it's necessary and it has to be done, but from a divine aspect, it's not real. None of it's true. None of it's real. There's only him. There's only one.
That actually relates, I think, pretty well to something my boy Greg Shaw, who I love most of his work, talks about, and this is sort of like an argument for a multiplicity in the divine. Like, I don't know if he uses the word pagan, but I think like that's kind of what he's getting at. Is that it is oftentimes a superior, I guess, spiritual understanding to a simple monotheism, because monotheism places the divine so far away from us that it's functionally unreachable. It's like there's no ladder to climb, so to speak, right? And his actual argument that he uses, I think that this was on the Magician and the Fool podcast, he said this, is that the the final outcome a lot of times to this way of thinking, where there is that one without multiplicity, is materialism, because there's just no tangible connection, you know? So though it is a paradox, I still think it's an important one to explore, because I kind of agree, when all you have is the center, how do you get there? You know, there's not any easy way. And I guess there's not any easy way in a theurgic framework either, you know,
No,
but at least there's a path.
You got to suffer to sing the blues, right?
Yeah, I guess so, right?
I mean, there's a lot of you know, things that you have to do to purify your soul in order to begin to ascend. So I don't know whether we can have an awareness of what the one is unless we actually become one with the one. We can talk about it. We can say it's this or that, but until we actually begin to ascend in some way, then we can begin to and maybe we can't even begin to say anything, right? Because it's beyond words. I mean, I had an experience a few months ago where it was I had entered this reality which was completely non-thinking of some kind, and it was only a glimpse. I mean, I'm not saying it was like way up there with the one, but it led me to believe that the way to the one is not going to be by words alone. And so the way to the one possibly will include, these types of rituals that the theorists are talking about, which we don't even know what they kind of don't even know what they are unless we go by what the Greek magical papyri have to say. Or, perhaps we also follow, or the way of Ibn al-Arabi, right? The way of Ibn al-Arabi, it seems to me, was meditational, contemplative.
Yeah, but I think he did use the Quran. He used the Arabic letters. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he used all of those things as
So he
well.
was he like the Kabbalist in the sense that, they're imagining the letters and the permutations of the letters, and
Yeah,
they're
no, I think it was more of a more invocations using the Arabic letters,
yeah,
and also the rituals of the prophetic way, because he was first and foremost an Islamic Sufi mystic. So
right,
it comes as part of being um being a part of Islam. The Quran is a part of that. So he
it's
doesn't say explicitly, like he doesn't go into much detail,
yeah,
but then there are lots of invocations in his work. He emphasizes the letters. He talks about how the letters have um like they're divided, and the letters have a hierarchy within itself. And
right,
then there are some letters that are the worker letters, but then some of them are the elite, and some of them are the elite of the elite. So he had really deep insight about this. So that's why his work fascinates me. And then he says some of the letters are the dark letters, and some of them are the light letters. And what they would do, the combination of them, and depending on how they're arranged, would spin the light. It would spin it, so there would be an interaction with the light and the dark. And I guess what I would understand from that is it would be the transmutation of the unconsciousness into consciousness, like it's that whole process.
yeah.
And that's what he kind of goes into. So it's really quite fascinating.
Hmm.
Kind of a side note on that, not related to anything. I find and like you said earlier, Farzana, about Hebrew, Greek, and and Arabic being the sort of like well-known divine languages. I find the Arabic language, and specifically the Arabic alphabet, to be just so fascinating for exactly these reasons. I mean, I did take, 1 year in undergrad of Arabic language, and even the way that, from what I understand, I'm again I would never say that I speak Arabic or anything like that, but even the way that like words are conjugated and stuff within the language, there's the sun and the moon are like present within that, even like within the grammatical structure itself. From what I understand from my very basic
Mhm.
undergrad level understanding of the language, like these concepts are injected into the language itself, which is like just so
Yeah.
cool to me. I mean, like it's exactly my sort of
Yes.
my sort
Super
of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what's really interesting is like I don't know, this is going off on a tangent, but there's someone called Stan Tenen. I think I mentioned him before, but he talks about the Hebrew letters. So I found that very, very interesting because Arabic is very closely related to Hebrew. And then he talks about the light of consciousness. So, what's in our core, what is in our core. And then he said that these letters, these sacred letters, are fire letters. So they look like a flame, like different angles of a flame. And when he said that, I was like, oh my God, my mind is blown. So our light of consciousness is what produces the fire letters. That's why these letters look like a flame. So it's like within our makeup, that's why these letters have always been known as sacred. I was like, wow, that's really quite fascinating.
Yeah,
So
that's
when
pretty
you
sweet.
recite them, yeah, and when this recitation is happening with these letters, what's happening is that our light of consciousness is becoming active, is doing the work. So that's why, it really kind of
Hmm.
blew my mind when I kind of looked at that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, I'll say it again. I think this goes back to the two concepts I've like consistently brought up in this call, which are symbolic thinking and intuition, right? I think that kind of perfectly reflects both those concepts, the way that consciousness allows us to construct these things, I think reflects intuition very well. And then the way that those letters then have their associations and their, light and dark aspects, their energies that they call upon. I think that it's perfect, and I think that I'm probably gonna crack open some of my old Arabic textbooks.
But
See if I
that
can
sounds
get any insight.
that does sound familiar to me. Like, yeah, it does resonate what you're saying. Yeah.
Kind of as a correlate to that, there's Abraham Abulafia, the Jewish Kabbalist and mystic, has certain exercises that go along with the speaking of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And
Yeah. Yeah.
there's recitation, there's repetition, and then one of the commentators, Moshe Idel, talked about this method, and it gets to the point where the letters don't even have any meaning per se. They're just being used to induce, if you will, this hyper consciousness, this hyper awareness of one
Yeah.
relation to. But what it is,
Interesting you say that. Yeah.
it's a
And if
way to
and if
break down our natural way of thinking, and our conceptual frame apparatus that we use to understand reality, because it's a way to get beyond concepts, if that's even possible. And I'm not so, as a Wittgensteinian, I'm not so sure that's even possible. But let's say it is. This is a way, it's a practice that you can inculcate within yourself to be able to begin that journey towards towards the higher reality.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that. I just wanted to finish off with what I was saying before, that it's gestures. So it's like the movements are the gestures.
Yeah.
So what Stan Tenen found was that all of the letters of the Hebrew language came from the yod, and the yod stands for the hand. The hand is a representation of action, which is the command of our heart, which is where consciousness is said to dwell, I guess, like, the eye of the heart or the center of the heart.
Right.
And then the hands have always been a representation of the heart. So the condition of your heart and how much it's purified will then determine your actions.
Just real quick, going off that, I also think that it's like very cool that, if all of the, using the mansions of the moon example that you brought up earlier, Frazana, if each mansion is associated with a letter, that means that all the letters together represent all, as well as, I guess, Aleph or Yod or whatever it might be in that different framework or different language. Like that all is then manifest when you look at them together, which I just find super cool as well.
Yeah, so this is like the idea where they're spinning off the center, which is the light of consciousness, the flame, and then as that moves, as that spins, it's throwing off all of these letters around them. So all of the letters are a representation of this central flame of consciousness, and that to me is like, wow. So yes, what you said has just given me this vision of the moon itself. It orbits around the sun, which is really interesting.
That's it for tonight. Join us for next week. See you then.